On a distant planet, a young human soldier named Jack found himself in an unfamiliar situation. He had been stationed on the alien world, assigned to keep the peace between the humans and the inhabitants of the planet. Yet this planet was no ordinary world. It was ruled by Queen Zara, a fierce and rebellious alien queen who had a reputation for her pride and anger toward anyone who was not from her race. She ruled with an iron fist, and her people had resisted the authority of the Galactic Council for years. Jack's job was to ensure that things stayed calm between the humans and the alien species. But it wasn't easy. Zara's people were proud and suspicious of humans. They saw them as weak, and many had tried to push the humans off their planet. Yet Jack, a soldier who was known for his calm and kind nature, believed that peace could still be achieved. He was there to show them that humans weren't the enemy they thought. One day, Jack and his team were out on a routine mission when everything went wrong. They were ambushed by a group of Zara's loyal soldiers. The attack was sudden, and the human soldiers didn't have much time to react. But Jack, being quick on his feet, made sure to protect his team, leading them through the dangerous terrain to escape. Unfortunately, during the retreat, Jack was separated from the others. He found himself surrounded by enemies with no way out. His heart pounded as he prepared for the worst. Just as the alien soldiers moved in on him, ready to capture or kill, a powerful voice echoed across the battlefield. "Stop," was the voice of Queen Zara herself. Jack looked up, surprised to see the queen standing tall on a nearby cliff. Her long silver hair fluttered in the wind, and her piercing eyes locked onto him. There was no fear in her gaze, only a cold calculation. But there was something else, a flicker of something Jack couldn't quite place. "Release him," Zara commanded. The soldiers hesitated, their loyalty to the queen stronger than their orders. But Zara's voice was firm, and they obeyed without question. She approached Jack slowly, her every movement graceful yet powerful. As she came closer, Jack could feel the weight of her presence. She was a queen, and she carried the burden of her people's history on her shoulders. She fought bravely. "Human," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "But you are foolish to think you can survive here on your own." Jack, despite the danger, stood tall. He had no intention of bowing to her. "I didn't fight for survival. I fought for my people. I'll do whatever it takes to keep the peace." Zara studied him, intrigued by his words. Humans, in her experience, were selfish creatures, only fighting for their own. This soldier, he was different. There was something in his eyes, a determination to protect, not just himself, but others. Zara couldn't help but respect that. "Why do you care so much about peace?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Jack was silent for a moment. He didn't know why exactly. It wasn't something that could be explained easily. "Because it's the only way forward," he finally said. "We can't keep fighting forever. No one wins in the end." Zara took a step closer, her gaze softening. "You speak of things that are beyond your understanding. My people have been fighting for centuries. There is no peace here." Jack didn't back down. "Maybe it's time to start a new path. I believe it's possible." The queen stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she turned to leave, her soldiers following her obediently. Jack stood there, still unsure of what had just happened. Why had she spared him? Why had she listened to him at all? Later that night, Jack couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to Zara. He had seen many leaders in his time, but none like her. There was something about hers, something more than just a queen. She was powerful, yes, but there was a vulnerability to her as well. She wasn't just a ruler. She was a person who had been shaped by her people's struggles. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to her than the cold and distant queen everyone talked about. The next day, Jack received an unexpected message. It was from Zara. "I want to speak with you. Come to the palace." Jack wasn't sure what to expect. Why would she want to meet with him? He had been certain that she would have forgotten about him by now. Just another soldier in a war he had no place in. But here she was, reaching out to him. He made his way to the palace with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The palace was grand, far more magnificent than anything he had ever seen. Its towering spires seemed to touch the sky, and the streets were lined with alien architecture that was both beautiful and intimidating. As Jack walked through the palace gates, he couldn't help but feel like he was stepping into a world he didn't belong in. Zara was waiting for him inside a large chamber, surrounded by her guards. But for once, the air wasn't heavy with tension. She didn't seem angry or distant. In fact, she looked almost uncertain. "Come," she said, gesturing to a seat beside her. "I need to understand why you fight for peace. What makes you think it's possible in a place like this?" Took the seat, feeling the weight of her gaze upon him. He didn't know if his answer would change anything, but he had to try. "I believe that kindness can break through any barrier," he said quietly. "I believe that people, no matter where they come from, have the ability to care for one another. If we want peace, we have to be willing to trust each other." Zara looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt, but there was none. She was used to seeing fear and hesitation, but not in Jack. His words rang true. She couldn't ignore the sincerity behind them. "You are a strange human," she said softly, almost to herself. "But perhaps there is more to you than I expected." Conversation continued for hours, and by the end, Zara's cold exterior had started to crack. She had heard things she never thought possible from a human soldier. Jack's kindness, his belief in peace, and his willingness to understand her people left a mark on her heart. The first time in a long while, Zara felt the faintest spark of hope. As Jack left the palace that night, he felt a strange sense of connection to the Queen. It wasn't just that they had talked, it was the way she had listened, truly listened to him. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to change things. And perhaps for the first time in her life, Zara could begin to believe in peace. Over the next few days, Jack and Zara spent more time together. The Queen had ordered her people to allow Jack and his team to stay within the safety of her palace. And while it was unusual, Jack couldn't help but feel that Zara was trying to understand something deeper about humanity. As he walked through the halls of the palace, he noticed how grand it was, full of ancient symbols and alien artifacts. But what stood out most to him was the emptiness in Zara's eyes. She was always surrounded by her soldiers, yet she seemed so alone. Zara was different than the rumors had made her out to be. The Queen, who had been feared by so many, was not just a ruthless leader. She was also a person who had been shaped by endless struggles. Her eyes revealed the weight of the crown she wore, and Jack began to realize that it wasn't just the burden of her kingdom that made her cold. It was the loneliness of a queen who had never known peace. Zara invited Jack to dinner one evening. It wasn't a royal banquet, but a quiet meal in a small chamber far from the grandeur of her throne room. It was the first time they had spoken without the formality of politics between them. Jack sat down at the long table, and Zara, still in her regal attire, sat across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. It was as if the silence itself was a new form of communication. "So, human soldier," Zara began, breaking the silence with a small smile, "tell me more about your world. What drives you to fight for peace?" Jack paused. This was the question he had been waiting for, but it still wasn't easy to answer. "My world is far from perfect," he began slowly. "There's a lot of war, a lot of pain, but I believe in people. I believe that if we try, we can make things better, even if it's just one small step at a time. Sometimes you have to choose kindness, even when others don't." Zara listened carefully, her eyes locked on Jack. "And what if kindness isn't enough? What if people are too broken to change?" Jack shrugged. "Maybe kindness is the only thing that can make a difference. If we stop trying, then we're already lost." Zara's lips pressed into a thin line. There was something in her that understood the weight of those words. She had fought for so long to keep control over her people, to protect them from the galaxy's demands. But at what cost? Jack's words made her question everything she had believed in. "Do you really think kindness can break the walls I've built around my people?" Zara asked, her voice softer now. Jack met her gaze, his answer clear in his heart. "I do. I think it's the only way to break down walls. It's the one thing no one expects." They ate in silence for a few moments. Jack could feel the tension in the air, but it wasn't an uncomfortable kind. It was the kind of silence that meant to people were finally starting to understand each other. The more they spoke, the more Zara seemed to open up. She asked Jack about his life, about what drove him to become a soldier. Jack explained how he had always wanted to protect others, even when it meant putting himself at risk. He told her about his family, his friends, and the sacrifices they had made for peace. Zara found herself listening intently, as though she was hearing a story she had never imagined. For so long, she had been surrounded by warriors, soldiers, who only knew how to fight and conquer. Jack was different. By the end of the meal, Zara was no longer the distant queen. She was someone Jack could understand, and that was something he hadn't expected. He began to see the cracks in her armor, the cracks that she had worked so hard to hide. Zara had never known the kind of bond Jack had with his people. She had never had anyone to trust completely. It was no wonder she had built up such walls around her heart. "I've never met anyone like you before, Jack," Zara said softly as the meal ended. You, ... You make me question everything I've ever believed in." Jack smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I don't have all the answers, Zara. I don't know if I can change anything, but I do know that we have to try." The next few days were different. Jack noticed that Zara's demeanor had softened, even though she still carried the weight of her people's expectations. She no longer gave commands from a distance, but began to listen more, especially to Jack. She even invited him to observe her council meetings, where they discussed the future of her kingdom and how to deal with the Galactic Council. Jack found himself in a world so different from his own, but he wasn't afraid. In fact, he felt more connected to Zara than ever before. One day, Zara took Jack to the royal gardens, a peaceful space far from the palace's imposing walls. As they walked through the lush greenery, Zara spoke of her childhood, of the innocence she had lost when she first became queen. She told Jack about the countless battles her people had fought, the endless war that had shaped her reign. But there was a sadness in her voice as she spoke, a longing for a time she could never get back. "Sometimes I wonder if there's more to life than just fighting," Zara confessed, as they stopped beside a fountain. "I wonder if I could have had a different life, one without all the bloodshed. But I was born into this role. I never had choice." Jack turned to her, his eyes soft with understanding. "Maybe you didn't choose this life, but you can choose what comes next." Zara met his gaze, her heart heavy with a new weight. She had spent so many years living in the shadow of her crown, convinced that her only purpose was to lead her people through war. But Jack's kindness had shown her another way, a way that didn't involve endless fighting. A way that was built on trust, respect, and, most importantly, peace. As they stood there in the royal gardens, Zara began to realize that maybe, just maybe, Jack was right. Maybe kindness could change everything. Maybe with his help they could find a way to end the endless cycles of violence that had defined her world for so long. But as the days passed, Zara knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be those who would resist her efforts for peace, people who would never accept a new way of life. But for the first time, she wasn't alone. Jack had shown her that change was possible, and she was willing to fight for it. The days passed slowly, but with each one, Jack and Zara grew closer. Their bond was unusual, born from mutual respect and a shared desire for peace in a world filled with conflict. Jack found himself thinking about Zara more and more. She was no longer the cold, distant queen he had once feared. Instead, she had become someone he could relate to. Someone who, despite her strength, was still human if, not in form, then in heart. Zara, too, was beginning to see Jack in a new light. She had spent so much of her life surrounded by warriors and soldiers, people who saw the world through the lens of power and domination. But Jack was different. He didn't carry the weight of war in the same way. His heart was lighter, his mind focused not on how to defeat others, but how to help them. He didn't see her as a ruler to be obeyed, but as a person who was capable of change just like he was. One evening, after a long day of meetings with her generals, Zara invited Jack to take a walk through the palace's outer courtyard. The night was cool, the stars twinkling above them. It was a peaceful moment, one that Zara rarely allowed herself to have. She was always surrounded by people, always in control. But tonight, she wanted to talk to Jack, to let her guard down. in a way she hadn't done with anyone in years. "Do you ever wonder if we could have a different life?" Zara asked as they walked under the night sky. Her voice was softer than usual, almost as if she was speaking more to herself than to him. Jack looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Zara stopped walking and looked out over the garden, her eyes distant. "I've spent my whole life fighting. My people have been at war for as long as I can remember. Every decision I make is weighed down by that history. Sometimes I wonder if there's a way to escape all of it, if I could just be normal. Live a life where I don't have to make these impossible choices." Jack's heart went out to her. He had always known she was burdened by her role, but hearing her admit it out loud made it even more real. Zara was the ruler of an entire world, but all she wanted was a chance to live freely, to not have her every move scrutinized. "I think everyone wants that," Jack said quietly. "But sometimes we have to make tough choices. The world isn't always fair, and it's not always kind. But that doesn't mean we can't try to make it better." Zara turned to him, her face softening. "You sound like you really believe that." Jack nodded. "I do. I think kindness can change the world, even if it seems impossible." Zara looked down at the ground, lost in thought. For a moment there was silence between them. The wind rustled the leaves of the trees, and Jack could hear the distant sounds of the palace bustling with activity. But here, in this quiet space, it felt like it was just the two of them. Two people from different worlds, but somehow connected in a way neither could explain. "I don't know if I can ever change," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been a queen for so long. I've been taught that my people's survival depends on my strength, on my ability to lead them in battle.
Ow!
Can I suddenly turn all of that around?" Jack took a step closer to her.
Ow.
"It's not about turning everything around at once. It's about taking one step, one choice at a time." Zara met his gaze, her eyes searching his face for any hint of doubt, but there was none. Jack truly believed in her, in what she could do. For the first time, Zara realized that maybe she could believe in herself too. "I don't know if I can do this alone," Zara admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Jack reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to. You don't have to do it alone. You've got me. You've got your people. If you want to change, I'll be here to help you. We'll figure it out together." There was a long pause, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Zara had always been the queen, the leader, the one who carried the weight of her people's future. But now, for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to be vulnerable. She allowed herself to feel the fear and uncertainty that she had hidden for so long. "Thank you," Zara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with a mixture of hope and pride. "I believe in you, Zara, and I believe in us." Zara looked up at the stars, her gaze far away again. But this time, it wasn't filled with the weight of responsibility. It was filled with possibility. She had never allowed herself to dream of a future without war, without bloodshed. But now, with Jack's words echoing in her mind, she realized that maybe, just maybe, it was possible as they stood there. Under the stars, Zara felt a sense of peace she had never known. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from victory or power. It was the kind of peace that came from understanding, from knowing that there was someone who cared enough to help her through the darkest parts of her journey. In that quiet moment, Zara made a decision. She would try to find a way to lead her people into a future where war was not the only answer. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be obstacles along the way, but with Jack by her side, she felt like anything was possible. "We'll do this together, won't we?" Zara asked, her voice steady once again. "Yes," Jack replied, his smile genuine. "We will." And for the first time, Zara felt a spark of hope in her heart, a hope that maybe, just maybe, peace was within reach. The days after their quiet conversation under the stars were different. Zara, once so closed off and distant, seemed more open, more willing to listen and think about the future. Jack, too, felt a change in the air. The bond between them had deepened, and they were no longer just two people from different worlds trying to survive. Now, they were partners, two people determined to find a way to change the future for the better. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the alien palace, Zara summoned Jack to her private chamber. The palace, with its towering spires and ancient designs, always felt both majestic and intimidating. But today, Jack felt different. He was no longer just a soldier walking through enemy territory. He was someone Zara trusted. When he arrived, Zara was standing by the large windows that overlooked the gardens. She looked out over the lush landscape, her expression thoughtful. "Jack," she said, turning to face him, "there's something I want to show you." He raised an eyebrow. "What's this about?" Zara didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to a table in the corner of the room where a large, ancient-looking box sat. It was covered in intricate carvings, and its surface gleamed. With an otherworldly light, Zara's fingers traced the carvings before she slowly opened the box. Revealing a glowing object inside, Jack stepped forward. His curiosity piqued. "What is that?" Zara's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "This is the most precious thing in my kingdom. It's a gift that has been passed down through generations of my people. It's said to grant immense power, but only to those worthy of it." Jack felt a sense of awe as he looked at the object. It was a small, glowing crystal, unlike anything he had ever seen. It pulsed with a soft light, and he could feel its energy radiating, even from where he stood. Zara continued, "This is the heart of our ancestors. It's what allowed my people to rise to power in the first place. It's the source of all our strength. And now, I want to give it to you." Jack's eyes widened. "What? Why me?" Zara met his gaze, her expression serious. "Because I believe in you, Jack. You've shown me that there is more to leadership than power and control. You've shown me that kindness, trust, and understanding are just as important. This gift is more than just a symbol of power. It's a symbol of trust. I'm giving it to you because I trust you to help me lead my people into a future that isn't defined by war." Jack was taken aback. He had never expected this. He wasn't a leader. He was just a soldier. But Zara's words struck something deep inside him. She was offering him not just the power of her people, but the trust of a queen who had never trusted anyone before. It was a powerful gift, but with it came a heavy responsibility. "I don't know if I'm worthy of this," Jack said, his voice full of uncertainty. Zara stepped closer, her eyes softening. "You are more worthy than you know. This isn't just about power, Jack. It's about trust, and I trust you." Jack reached out slowly, his hand hovering over the crystal. As his fingers brushed its surface, a rush of energy coursed through him. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like something inside him had awakened. The crystal's light brightened, for a moment before settling back to its soft glow. "What does it do?" Jack asked, his voice a mix of awe and fear. Zara's gaze never left his face. "It enhances the abilities of those who possess it, but it also brings with it a great responsibility. It's not something you can wield lightly. If used for personal gain or violence, it could destroy you. But if used for the good of others, it can help shape the future." Jack stared at the crystal, feeling its power thrumming beneath his fingers. He could feel the weight of Zara's words. This wasn't just a gift, it was a test. Zara was giving him the power to help her change the future, but it came with the risk of losing himself in the process. "I won't let you down," Jack said quietly. It wasn't a promise he made lightly. He knew that with this gift came great responsibility, but he also knew that he had never felt more determined to fight for something worth fighting for. Zara nodded, her eyes filled with both pride and worry. "I know you won't." A few days, Jack began to study the crystal. Zara had given him access to the royal archives, where ancient texts and knowledge were kept. He pored over the records, trying to understand the full extent of what he had been entrusted with. The crystal, it seemed, was not just a source of power. It was a key to unlocking the hidden potential of the galaxy. But the more Jack learned, the more he realized just how dangerous this power could be. Zara had been right. This wasn't something to be taken lightly. Meanwhile, Zara continued her work as queen, trying to balance her duties to her people with her growing desire for change. She knew that her reign could never be the same after everything she had learned from Jack. The thought of using the crystal's power to fuel more war and violence seemed impossible to her now. But there were others in her court who didn't share her vision for peace. There were still those who believed that power was the only way to secure her people's future. One evening, as Jack walked through the halls of the palace, he overheard a heated conversation between Zara and one of her closest advisors, Dran. The argument was loud enough that Jack couldn't help but listen in. "We cannot afford to show weakness, Zara," Dran was saying. "If you give up the power of the crystal, we'll lose everything. The galaxy will see us as weak and will be crushed." Zara's voice was calm, but Jack could hear the strain in. "I don't want to fight anymore, Dran. I don't want to continue this endless cycle of violence. I need to find another way." Dran sneered. "You're naive if you think kindness and peace will save us. The galaxy won't care about your ideals. They'll only care about who's strongest. And if you won't use the power of the crystal to fight, I will." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Dran's words were a warning. There were people who would stop at nothing to maintain the old ways. Zara's vision of peace was in danger. He knew that the gift Zara had given him wasn't just a symbol of trust. It was a weapon, too. And if he didn't act, it could be used against everything they were trying to build. Jack stood in the dimly lit chamber, the crystal glowing faintly in his hand. The weight of it felt heavier with each passing day, not because of its physical mass, but because of the responsibility it carried. Zara had trusted him with this power, but the more he learned, the more he realized how dangerous it could be. It was a weapon, a tool for incredible change, but it could also destroy them if they weren't careful. The days following, Zara's gift had been tense. While she continued to work on her plans for peace, Jack was faced with constant pressure from those who didn't share her vision. Zara's advisors, particularly Dran, had made it clear that they didn't want peace, they wanted power. The idea of giving up their ancient traditions, of abandoning the strength that had kept their people in control for so long, was unthinkable to many of them. Jack had tried to reason with them, to explain that peace was the only way forward, but they were stubborn, and their minds were set on war. Dran had made his position clear during their last meeting. If Zara refused to use the crystal's power to crush her enemies, they would take matters into their own hands. The more Jack thought about it, the more he realized how true Dran's words were. Zara had been living in a world of war for so long that she had never truly seen another way. But the people around her, the ones who wanted to maintain the status quo, would never let peace take root. They feared what might happen if Zara showed any weakness, if she didn't wield the power of the crystal like a weapon. One evening, as Jack walked through the palace halls, he overheard a conversation that would change everything. "I don't care about your ideals, Zara." Dran's voice was sharp and filled with frustration. "The galaxy will never respect you if you back down now. You have the power. Use it." Zara's voice, calm but weary, responded. "I can't keep living like this. War, violence, it's all we know. I want something different for my people." "Then you'll lose them," Dran shot back. "The galaxy won't wait for your peace. They'll destroy us if we don't fight." Jack stopped in his tracks, hearing the tension in Zara's voice, as she replied, "I won't lead them into another war." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this moment would come. Zara would be forced to make a decision. And it wouldn't be easy. He entered the room just as Dran left, a scowl on his face. Zara was alone now, standing by the window, her back to him. He could see the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her shoulders. "Zara," Jack said softly, walking toward her. She didn't turn to face him immediately. Instead, she looked out. Over the palace grounds, her eyes distant. "What if Dran is right, Jack? What if we don't have a choice? What if peace is just a dream we can't afford?" Jack stepped closer, trying to find the right words. "You have a choice. We always have. A choice, Zara. You don't have to fight. Not if you don't want to. But if you give up now, if you give in to those who want more violence, you'll lose everything you've worked for. You'll lose yourself." Zara turned to him then, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know what else to do. I've spent my entire life fighting. My people don't know anything but war. They expect me to lead them to victory, not to peace. How can I change all of that?" Jack reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm with you. And I'll help you. We can do this together. But you have to believe in it, in yourself. You can't give in to fear. Zara's eyes searched his face, as if trying to find some certainty in his words. After a long moment, she spoke again, her voice quieter than before. What if it costs me everything? What if I have to sacrifice everything I've known to make peace? Jack squeezed her hand gently. You might have to. But sometimes we have to lose something to gain something greater. If we hold on to the past, we'll never move forward. But if you choose peace, Zara, you'll show your people that there's more to life than war. You'll give them a chance at something better. Zara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She was torn. The pressure to hold on to power, to show her people that she was strong and capable of leading them, was enormous. Was Jack's words echoed. In her mind, maybe, just maybe, there was another way. A way that didn't involve more bloodshed. A way that didn't involve losing herself in the process. I'll do it, she said quietly, finally making up her mind. I'll try. I'll try to change everything. Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. I know you will. But Zara knew it wouldn't be easy. She had spent years building her kingdom on the foundation of power and strength. To let go of that, to choose peace over war, would be a sacrifice in itself. It would cost her everything she had ever known. But if it meant a chance for her people to live without fear, without constant conflict, then it was a sacrifice worth. Making the next day, Zara called a meeting with her council, including Dran. Jack stood by her side, his presence a silent support as Zara prepared to take the most difficult step of her reign. Dran's eyes narrowed as Zara spoke, the queen's voice steady and calm. I have made a decision, Zara said, her gaze sweeping across the room. I will not use the crystal to wage war. Instead, I will use it to bring peace. We will negotiate with the galaxy, and we will find a way to coexist with the other species without bloodshed. I am ready to sacrifice my power if it means saving my people. Dran's face reddened with anger. You would give up everything? You would let your people fall to their enemies just for some fleeting dream of peace? Zara met his gaze, her eyes unflinching. Willing to lose everything for the chance to build something better? That means stepping down from power? So be it. The room fell silent. Ant's fury was evident, but Zara stood firm. She had made her choice, and she wouldn't let fear stop her. Jack watched her, his heart swelling with pride. Zara had done it. She had chosen the harder path, the path of peace. And though the road ahead would be difficult, he knew they would face it together. Because in the end, it wasn't about power or strength. It was about doing what was right, and Zara had just made the right choice. The palace had never been so quiet. The weight of Zara's decision hung heavily in the air, and though she had chosen the path of peace, the consequences of that choice were still unknown. She had walked away from the power that had defined her life for so long, but the people around her, especially those like Dran, were not ready to let go of the old ways. They were loyal to her, but loyalty to the queen did not always mean loyalty to the idea of peace. Zara stood on the balcony of the palace, staring out into the distance. Below her, the grand city stretched out, tangent buildings, bustling streets, and a people who had known nothing but war for generations. They had followed her because she was strong. They had followed her because they feared her enemies and knew that strength was the only way to survive. But now, she was asking them to follow her into the unknown. She was asking them to trust that there was a better way. But trust was not something easily earned, especially not when it had been built on fear and power for so long. Jack joined her. On the balcony, his presence a quiet comfort. He had been there through it, all helping her make this decision, supporting her even when others doubted. His faith in her had never wavered, and in many ways, it had given her the strength to make the choice she knew she had to make. You've done it, Jack said softly, standing beside her. You've made the right choice, Zara. It's not easy, but you've already taken the hardest step. Zara turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I hope so, Jack, but I'm not sure if my people will understand. They've always followed me because of my power, because I led them through every battle. What if they can't follow me now? What if they see me as weak? Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Your people don't need a queen who fights for power. They need someone who believes in something better. Someone who's willing to risk everything for them, just like you have, they'll see that. Oh. Zara looked out over the city once more. The light of the setting sun cast long shadows across the streets, and she wondered what the future held. Would she be able to change the hearts of those who had followed her for so long? Would they understand that peace was more important than power? It was a question that had no answer, at least not yet. That night, Zara called for another council meeting. This time, however, it wasn't just to discuss strategy or military matters. She was calling them together to explain her decision, to ask them for their trust. She had already spoken to Jack, and now it was time to speak to her people. As the council members entered the chamber, Zara felt the weight of their gaze. Dran was there, of course, his face set in a hard expression. He had made it clear in the past that he wasn't happy with her decision to abandon the crystal and the power it represented. Zara knew he would not be easy to convince. The meeting began quietly. Zara stood at the head of the table, her posture straight and strong, despite the uncertainty she felt inside. She had to make them see that this was the only way forward. "I've made a decision," Zara began, her voice steady. "For too long, I have led you all with the belief that power was the only way to secure our future. I thought that by being strong, by defeating our enemies, I could give you the peace you deserved. But I was wrong." There were murmurs around the table. Dran's eyes narrowed, and Zara could feel the tension in the room rise. She wasn't sure how to start, but she knew she had to speak from the heart. "We've spent too many years fighting, too many years in conflict. We've forgotten what it means to live without fear, without hatred. I've decided to stop the violence. I won't fight anymore. Instead, I will lead you toward a future where we don't have to keep fighting for survival." Dran stood up, his voice loud and filled with anger. "You're making a mistake, Zara. You're throwing away everything we fought for. The galaxy won't respect us if we don't show strength. If we don't fight, we'll be wiped out. You can't give up power now." Zara met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I'm not giving up power, Dran. I'm giving up war. Giving up the belief that violence is the only way forward. We can be strong without fighting. We can show the galaxy that we are capable of peace." There was a long silence. Jack stood at her side, his presence a silent support. Zara knew that this would be the moment that would define her reign. If she couldn't convince them now, everything would be lost. But as she looked around the table, she saw something unexpected. The other council members, the ones who had been loyal to her for so long, were no longer as resolute in their opposition. There was doubt in their eyes, hesitation. They were listening, and that in itself was a victory. Dran looked around the room, his face dark with anger, but there was something different. Now something had shifted. Zara had stood her ground. She had made her decision, and even if they didn't understand it, they could no longer ignore it. "I don't expect you to agree with me," Zara continued. "I don't expect you to suddenly follow me without question. But I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I'm doing what's best for our future. Trust that we can change. I believe in this, and I believe in you." The room was still for a moment, and then one by one, the council members began to nod. They weren't all convinced, but they were listening. They were willing to give her a chance. Dran, still standing, looked at her with contempt, but said nothing. Zara's heart sank a little, but she refused to be discouraged. She had made her choice, and now she had to see it through. "We'll try it your way," Dran finally muttered. "But if this leads to disaster, don't come to us asking for help." Zara nodded, knowing that she was taking a risk. But this was the only path forward, the only way to build the kind of future she wanted. As the council meeting ended, Jack walked with Zara through the halls of the palace. There were no words between them, just the sound of their footsteps echoing through the quiet corridors. Zara had done it. She had made them listen. Now the real work would begin. "I'm proud of you," Jack said quietly. Zara smiled, though. The weight of what lay ahead still pressed on her. "It's not over yet, Jack, but I'll keep fighting for this, for peace." And for the first time, Zara felt like maybe, just maybe, peace wasn't as far out of reach as it had once seemed. It would be a long road, and there would be challenges ahead. But with Jack by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next.